The morning sun stretched lazily over the Nevada desert, its pale gold light spilling across the military base like liquid fire. Rows of beige tents and armored vehicles reflected the first rays, but one figure moved through the morning shadows with a calm, almost purposeful grace. Sergeant Emma Collins, 27, walked lightly over the gravel, her combat boots crunching softly. She carried nothing more than her medical bag, though beneath her uniform, the faint outline of a sidearm pressed against her hip. To anyone watching, she looked like the quintessential medic, quiet, composed, the kind of soldier who healed rather than fought. Emma's blue eyes scanned the base with a careful, deliberate focus. She had always been this way, meticulous, observant, calm under pressure. Her team often joked that she was too gentle for combat. "You couldn't hurt a fly, Collins," one of the privates teased during morning drills. A grin stretched across his sunburned face. Emma smiled politely, ignoring him, though the corner of her mouth lifted with just the faintest hint of amusement. She had learned long ago that appearances were powerful, sometimes more than weapons or rank. Her day began as usual, checking medical supplies, organizing bandages, syringes, and morphine vials with precise care. She treated her tools with the same reverence some soldiers reserved for firearms, polishing and arranging them like an artist preparing a canvas. There was a rhythm to it, a quiet meditation that steadied her mind. She moved with efficiency, each motion deliberate, almost fluid, as if the world had slowed just for her. In her hands, gauze and scissors carried more than function. They carried control, the ability to protect, to save, to make a difference. Yet there was more to Emma than her calm demeanor suggested. Beneath the neatly pressed uniform and medic insignia, a storm had been tempered through years of discipline and quiet determination. She had grown up in a small Colorado town, the daughter of a retired Marine father and a nurse mother. From him, she inherited a quiet toughness, an unwavering belief that preparation could overcome chaos. From her mother, she learned precision, patience, and empathy. Together, these lessons had molded her into something both fierce and gentle, a paradox that few could recognize at first glance. Her father's lessons were practical and relentless. He had taught her to shoot, to move silently through terrain, to anticipate danger before it arrived. On long afternoons in the backyard, he would pace while Emma crouched behind obstacles, firing at targets with cold precision. He never smiled much, but his pride was evident in the tight line of his jaw. "Never depend on others for your safety," he would remind her, voice low but stern. "Your life is yours to protect, always." Her mother, on the other hand, spent hours guiding her hands through sutures, bandages, and patient care. "Precision saves lives," she would say, watching Emma practice over dolls or volunteer patients at the local clinic. Emma remembered the way her mother's hands would gently correct her movements, teaching her that even in moments of pressure, calm and methodical actions mattered most. The combination of these two worlds, healing and combat, gave Emma a unique edge, though it was one she rarely flaunted. At 27, Emma had already earned respect in the military, though not always for the reasons most expected. Her colleagues valued her not just for her medical skill, but for her ability to remain composed under fire. She had been in situations that tested even the most hardened soldiers, and each time she had emerged with her team intact and her calm unbroken. And yet, for all her experience, she carried a quiet humility. She never sought recognition, medals, or glory. Her satisfaction came from the simple knowledge that she had done her job and that others were alive because of her. This morning, however, felt different. There was an almost imperceptible tension in the air, a subtle shift that made her pulse quicken despite her outward calm. The desert wind carried a faint, dry scent of dust and danger, and Emma noticed the unusual stillness around the base. Birds seemed absent from the sky. The usual chatter of soldiers was muted, replaced by a nervous energy she could almost touch. Her instincts, honed over years of observation and experience, whispered to her that something was coming. Something that would demand both halves of who she was, the healer and the fighter. Emma walked toward the mess tent, passing rows of trucks and equipment. Soldiers waved, some with casual smiles, others with tentative nods. She returned their gestures politely, but her mind remained focused, scanning for any sign of irregularity. She found solace in small routines, arranging her kit, checking the contents, making mental lists of what might be needed in emergencies. Every bandage, every vial, every piece of equipment was accounted for. There was a ritual to this, a sense of control in a world that often felt uncontrollable. Her thoughts drifted briefly to home. She pictured the small town nestled against Colorado mountains, her father's rifle on the wall, her mother bustling in the kitchen. Memories of quiet evenings, the laughter of siblings, the scent of pine and baked bread, these moments anchored her. They reminded her of why she fought, why she endured, and why she would face whatever came next with unwavering resolve. By mid-morning, the base was fully awake. Soldiers hustled, engines roared, and helicopters began their routines. Emma's team gathered for the pre-deployment briefing, the commander outlining the day's assignments with precision and authority. Emma listened carefully, absorbing every detail. The mission appeared routine on paper: humanitarian aid, perimeter security, medical support. But routine, she knew from experience, could be deceptive. Calm before the storm was often the deadliest moment. When the briefing ended, Emma returned to her kit one last time. She double-checked her supplies and subtly touched the sidearm beneath her uniform, a quiet reminder that she was prepared for more than scrapes and cuts. She took a deep breath, centering herself, feeling the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on her shoulders. Today, like every day in her life, she would walk a line between life and death, healing and violence, care and survival. And she was ready. The desert sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the base. Emma adjusted her pack, lifted her chin, and moved toward the awaiting transport with deliberate steps. To the world, she was the medic, the calm, competent healer. But deep inside, she knew that soon she might have to be something more, something the world was not prepared for. And in the quiet before the storm, Sergeant Emma Collins was ready to reveal the true extent of who she had become. The roar of the helicopter's engines shook the ground, rattling the gravel beneath Emma Collins' boots. She climbed into the transport, her medical bag slung over one shoulder, and took a seat near the rear. The inside of the aircraft was a chaotic mix of soldiers, gear, and the faint tang of fuel and sweat. Faces that had been calm on the base now carried an edge of anticipation, some masked with bravado, others thinly veiled anxiety. Private Lucas, a wiry 20-year-old with wide, nervous eyes, slid into the seat next to her. He fidgeted with his helmet strap, muttering under his breath. First deployment, he admitted, his voice barely audible over the thrum of the rotors. Emma glanced at him, her expression calm, almost maternal. "It's okay to be scared," she said, her tone even and quiet. "Fear keeps you alive. Just don't let it make your decisions for you." Lucas blinked, trying to absorb her words. He had heard similar reassurances from the older soldiers, but there was something in Emma's voice, a weight of experience, a certainty that made it different. She wasn't giving empty comfort. She was speaking from the heart of someone who had stared danger in the eye and walked away still standing. The helicopter lifted into the sky, leaving the dust and heat of the base behind. The desert stretched endlessly beneath them, golden and unforgiving. Emma pressed her fingers to the edge of her bag, feeling the smooth metal of the sidearm tucked beneath her uniform. No one else noticed. It was tucked away, invisible, a silent guardian she carried without fanfare. The mission had been described as low risk, a joint humanitarian operation: deliver medical aid to a remote village, provide security, and leave without incident. On paper, it sounded simple. Too simple. Emma's instincts, honed by years of training and countless deployments, whispered warnings she couldn't ignore. Quiet missions often ended in chaos. She had learned this truth the hard way, in places where routine meant death was waiting around the next bend. Her thoughts drifted to home. Colorado, the mountains, the small town where she had grown up under the guidance of her father and mother. She remembered mornings in the backyard, learning to shoot with precise aim, evenings watching her mother stitch wounds in the clinic, the smell of antiseptic mingling with pine from the windows left open to the mountain air. Every lesson, every memory had prepared her for this moment, though she didn't yet know how much she would need it. As the helicopter sped forward, the team prepared their equipment, checking rifles, radios, and body armor. Emma focused on her medkit, ensuring every bandage, every vial, every instrument was in its proper place. Soldiers around her laughed and joked, attempting to mask their nerves. One of them nudged her lightly. "Don't get lost in the medic bag, Collins. We need you alive, not buried under gauze." She smiled faintly. Humor had a way of easing tension, but it didn't erase the reality of their mission. She understood that fear, when managed correctly, could be a tool rather than a weakness. Each soldier was a thread in the fabric of survival, and she was both the seamstress and, if necessary, the shield. The terrain below changed as the hours passed. Flat desert gave way to jagged hills, sparse vegetation, and winding dirt paths. Emma scanned the landscape instinctively, noting shadows that moved too quickly, ridges that could conceal ambushes. Nothing out of the ordinary yet, but her intuition told her this was no ordinary assignment. Every sense she had, honed over years of observation, training, and instinct, screamed vigilance. Captain Morales, their commanding officer, walked past, issuing last-minute instructions. His presence was steady, commanding, yet even he seemed aware of the subtle tension in the air. "Stay alert. Keep to the plan. Watch each other's backs," he said, his gaze lingering on Emma for a moment longer than usual. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, that she could handle herself in ways most soldiers could not. Yet no one would ever truly anticipate what was coming. The helicopter banked slightly, descending toward the remote village. Emma secured her seatbelt and checked her kit one last time. She adjusted the straps, ensuring nothing shifted during landing, her fingers brushing the smooth metal of her sidearm again, a private ritual, a silent acknowledgement of what might be required. She wasn't only here to treat the injured. She might have to protect them first. The village appeared below, a scattering of small mud brick homes surrounded by sparse trees and dry fields. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the faint chatter of villagers carried up to the helicopter. Children ran to greet the incoming soldiers, laughing and waving. Emma's heart softened for a moment, seeing the innocent joy that contrasted so sharply with the dangerous world surrounding them. But the softness passed quickly, replaced by awareness. Smiles could not defend against bullets. The helicopter landed with a jolt, dust rising in thick clouds around them. Soldiers disembarked quickly, weapons ready, scanning the horizon. Emma stepped down carefully, the soles of her boots crunching on gravel. Her eyes darted to the ridges surrounding the village. Movement in the shadows. She caught it out of the corner of her eye, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to set her nerves alight. She knelt to greet a young child who had run toward them, examining a scraped knee. "Careful," she said softly, applying antiseptic. "Hold still. This might sting a little." The child flinched, then relaxed under her steady hands. For a moment, The world seemed simple, safe. But the flicker of movement in the hills reminded Emma that danger never slept. It only waited. By late afternoon, the village was calm, almost deceptively so. Emma moved among her team, checking on both soldiers and villagers. Conversations floated around her, the soldiers' banter, the hum of distant generators, the soft cooing of children returning to play. She smiled faintly to herself, appreciating the fragile normalcy. But she did not allow herself to be lulled. Her instincts, refined through years of observation and quiet practice, told her that peace, especially here, was a prelude to violence. She felt it in the tension of the soldiers' shoulders, in the too perfect stillness of the fields beyond the village, in the desert wind that carried faint scents of dust and something else, smoke, oil, the iron tongue of blood not yet shed. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in deep shades of red and gold, Emma sensed the shift she had been anticipating. The quiet before the storm had arrived. Her fingers brushed the edge of her sidearm once more, a silent acknowledgement that her role as healer might soon merge with the role she had always been trained to embrace: protector, warrior, survivor. The helicopter had brought them here for peace. The desert had other plans. And Sergeant Emma Collins, medic and daughter of two worlds, one of care, one of combat, was ready. She didn't yet know the full extent of what would be required. But she had faced danger before, and she had survived. In the fading light, as villagers returned to their homes and soldiers fortified positions, Emma prepared herself. The calm, the laughter, the routines of the day were fleeting. Something was coming, and she would be ready. She always was. The village seemed peaceful as evening approached. Children ran barefoot over the dusty paths, chasing each other with laughter that rang out like wind chimes. Smoke curled lazily from small hearths, carrying the scent of cooking bread and roasting meat. Villagers moved with measured ease, exchanging greetings with the soldiers, who returned smiles with cautious politeness. Emma Collins moved among them quietly, her hands steady, her eyes alert, scanning every detail. Each smile, each gesture, each shadow held a story, and she read them all with the practiced calm of someone trained to anticipate the unpredictable. She knelt beside a young boy whose arm had been scraped while running. "Hold still," she said gently, applying antiseptic to the wound. The boy flinched, then relaxed under her calm hands. Emma's touch was precise, comforting, almost maternal, but there was an underlying strength that made it clear she would not hesitate to protect those in her care. Around her, other soldiers moved through the village, checking security, engaging in light conversation with wary adults. Emma's attention never wavered from the hills beyond the village, where shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. Private Lucas approached her, shifting nervously from foot to foot. "Sergeant, do you ever get scared?" he asked quietly, as if speaking too loudly would summon danger. Emma looked at him, her blue eyes calm and steady. "Fear isn't a weakness," she said. "It's a tool. It keeps you alive. The trick is not letting it make your decisions for you." Lucas nodded, absorbing her words, though his tense shoulders betrayed the anxiety he tried to hide. As night began to fall, the village took on a different character. The warmth of daylight faded into shadows, and the hum of insects rose as the air cooled. Soldiers lit small lanterns near their positions, casting golden circles of light on the ground. The villagers retreated indoors, doors and windows closing with soft thuds. A thin wind stirred, carrying with it the scent of dust and distant vegetation, but also something else, an almost imperceptible tension in the air that Emma could feel deep in her chest. Captain Morales gathered the team near the village center for a brief check-in. "All positions secured?" he asked, scanning the group. Soldiers murmured affirmatively, though some faces betrayed unease. Keep your eyes open, he warned. Stay alert. These regions are never as safe as they appear. His gaze lingered on Emma. He knew what she knew, that danger often arrived silently, and that those who underestimated were the first to pay the price. Emma returned to her station, arranging her medical supplies while maintaining a constant scan of the surrounding hills. Every movement of the wind-blown grass, every flicker of shadow, was noted. Her mind worked in parallel, attending to the immediate, the villagers' wounds, the soldiers' scrapes, while analyzing potential threats. She was both healer and sentinel, roles she had mastered through a combination of instinct, training, and experience. The first sign of unease came subtly. A rustle in the distant brush, almost imperceptible, caught her attention. She paused, glancing toward the ridge that overlooked the village. For a brief moment, the wind carried the faintest metallic scent, the hint of something artificial mingling with the dust. Emma's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. She had learned to trust instincts that whispered of unseen danger. Today, those instincts were screaming. A few soldiers laughed nervously nearby, attempting to mask their apprehension with humor. Too quiet tonight, one muttered. Feels like the calm before the storm. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. Quiet doesn't always mean safe, she said softly, almost to herself. The words lingered in the air, unnoticed by most, but they were not lost on those trained to listen. She moved through the village, checking on the small medical tents and speaking quietly with villagers, offering reassurances and bandaging minor cuts. Each interaction reminded her why she was here, not just to fight, but to preserve life. She worked efficiently, her hands moving with surgical precision, yet her eyes never stopped scanning the perimeter. Every hill, every ridge, every shadow could conceal movement that would turn peace into chaos. Lucas approached again, this time quieter, more hesitant. Sergeant? What happens if something goes wrong? His voice trembled, and his youthful face betrayed his fear. Emma crouched beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Then we adapt. We survive. We protect those who can't protect themselves, she said, her voice steady, unflinching. And we never lose sight of the ones we care about. The words were simple, but they carried weight, a lesson learned from countless situations where survival depended not on luck, but on preparation, focus, and courage. As darkness settled, the village became a mosaic of shadows and firelight. Lanterns flickered across walls, casting long, wavering shapes. Emma paused at the edge of her tent, feeling the tension in the air coalesce into something almost tangible. It was quiet, too quiet, and she could sense that eyes were watching from the hills. The soldiers were unaware, busy with minor tasks, their laughter now muted, their conversations distracted. Emma's instincts told her that they had crossed an invisible threshold. She checked her medkit one final time, ensuring everything was in order. Her sidearm was secure, her rifle easily accessible, and her mind clear. She had been here before, in situations where the world seemed calm before erupting into violence. She knew that when it came, it would be fast, brutal, and unforgiving. But she also knew that she was ready, that her training, her instincts, and her quiet resolve would carry her through. The sun had fully set, and the stars began to emerge in the clear desert sky. The wind shifted again, rushing against her face with a cold, almost foreboding whisper. Emma felt a shiver, not of fear, but of anticipation. She adjusted her pack, checked her straps, and scanned the perimeter one last time. Everything seemed peaceful, but she knew better. Peace in this place was fleeting, fragile, and deceptive. And then, as she stood at the edge of the tent, watching the village settle into its evening routine, a distant rustle carried through the night air, soft, deliberate, almost imperceptible. Emma froze, every muscle taut, every sense alert. Her hands brushed the edge of her sidearm beneath her uniform. She knew, with the same certainty she had felt countless times before, that the calm was about to shatter. Somewhere in the shadows, movement was preparing. An ambush was forming. Emma Collins, a medic who had always been underestimated, would soon have to be more than a healer. The night was deceptively calm. The village lay in semi-darkness, lanterns flickering in small clusters, shadows stretching across narrow alleys. Soldiers sat near their positions, cleaning weapons, whispering quietly to each other, or checking radios that now carried only static. Emma Collins moved among them, her hands steady as she arranged medical supplies and spoke with villagers. Yet beneath her calm exterior, a storm was brewing, one that she could feel in her bones, in the tightening of her chest, in the subtle vibration of the air around her. It came suddenly, without warning. A thunderous explosion ripped through the stillness, shaking the ground and sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Emma was thrown to the ground instinctively, her bag sliding beside her as the world erupted in fire and noise. The convoy trucks on the outskirts of the village had been hit first, engulfed in flames, the metal twisting and groaning under the heat. Screams followed immediately, soldiers caught in the blast, villagers frozen in shock, children crying as chaos erupted around them. Bullets cracked through the night, hissing like deadly vipers. Emma's instincts kicked in instantly. She dragged herself to the nearest wall, pulling the nearest wounded soldier behind her. Blood ran freely from a gash across his forehead. "Stay down," she shouted, voice sharp and commanding despite the roar of gunfire. Her hands moved quickly, applying a tourniquet, checking the severity of the wound, while her eyes scanned the battlefield. The attackers were everywhere, coordinated, efficient, and merciless. From the ridges surrounding the village, shadows moved, disappearing and reappearing in bursts of movement that spoke of experience and lethal intent. Emma saw the enemy advancing on her team, circling with precision. She realized, with a jolt, that this was no random attack. They had planned this ambush carefully, timing it to perfection. The calm, routine mission she had prepared for was gone. Captain Morales shouted orders, rallying the soldiers, but the enemy fire was relentless. Several men went down in seconds, pinned by precision shooting. Emma's mind raced, simultaneously assessing injuries and calculating survival strategies. She had been trained for moments like this, but nothing could fully prepare anyone for the sight of friends falling around them in such rapid succession. Smoke, dust, and fire mingled, turning the village into a chaotic labyrinth of danger. Emma's hands moved with practiced efficiency. She applied pressure to wounds, stabilized limbs, and whispered calm reassurances to the injured. But as she looked up, she realized the attackers were closing in on the wounded, her team. Something inside her shifted. Healing alone would not suffice. She could not watch her comrades be cut down. She would have to act. Slowly, deliberately, Emma reached beneath her uniform and unhooked her medic armband. She set it aside and drew her sidearm from its holster. The soldiers around her glanced at her, confusion momentarily breaking through the terror on their faces. "Collins, the medic?" One gasped, incredulous. She gave no answer. There was no time for explanations. She had a job to do, one that went beyond tending wounds. She rose to her feet, moving carefully through the chaos. Her movements were precise, each step calculated to minimize exposure. She ducked behind overturned carts, slipped along walls, and used shadows as cover. The skills taught by her father long ago, shooting from concealment, predicting enemy movement, were no longer theoretical lessons. They were life-saving tactics. Emma fired deliberately, efficiently, neutralizing one enemy combatant after another with calm precision. The first insurgent fell silently, then another. Emma moved like a ghost, her mind operating with surgical clarity. She assessed threats, prioritized targets, and anticipated movements. Every shot, every step, every breath was deliberate. She became a single point of lethal focus in the chaos, a storm moving through fire and smoke. Soldiers who had watched her as merely a healer began to follow her lead, inspired by her fearlessness and precision. Amid the carnage, she found Captain Morales, wounded but conscious. "Cover me," he barked, his face grim. Emma laid down suppressive fire, her rifle steady, her mind a focused machine. She saw the attackers regrouping, attempting to flank the survivors. Her pulse was steady, her hands unshaking. Years of preparation, of instinct honed into reflex, carried her through every second. She moved fluidly, a deadly combination of healer and predator. The battle raged for minutes that felt like hours. Emma's training allowed her to move from point to point, checking on the injured, firing at advancing enemies, and ensuring that no one under her care was left behind. Smoke and dust choked the air, burning eyes and making every breath an effort, but she continued, unwavering. Her team began to rally, emboldened by her presence, seeing in her actions the courage they needed to survive. Then came the leader of the ambush, tall, muscular, and brutal. He moved with confidence, clearly experienced, scanning for threats with deadly efficiency. He saw Emma and laughed cruelly, assuming she was a helpless medic. That assumption would cost him. Emma met his gaze steadily, loading her rifle and tracking his movement. In that moment, all training, all instinct, all experience converged. She was ready. The confrontation was violent and personal. The leader advanced, firing rapidly, but Emma was faster. She ducked, rolled, and returned fire with deadly accuracy. The fight was close, brutal, and precise. Emma's knowledge of anatomy guided her strikes, ensuring maximum effectiveness with minimum wasted effort. The leader fell, and the remaining insurgents faltered. The tide had turned. By the time reinforcements arrived, the ambush had been neutralized. Emma stood in the middle of the battlefield, bloodied, bruised, and exhausted, yet unwavering. Around her, soldiers assessed the aftermath, bodies of the fallen enemy, wounded comrades, and the remnants of what had been a routine mission now transformed into chaos. The medic who had been underestimated had become a force capable of turning the tide alone. Captain Morales approached, steadying himself against the wreckage. "Sergeant, you saved them all," he said, awe in his voice. Emma simply nodded, her eyes scanning the perimeter for any remaining threat. She said nothing of the adrenaline, the fear, the rage, the calculated moves that had allowed her to survive. There was no time for pride. There was only survival and ensuring that everyone else lived. That night, as the village slowly returned to a semblance of calm, Emma Collins stood alone on the ridge, surveying the battlefield. The sky above was dark, the stars faint through the lingering smoke. She had acted, fought, and survived, but the weight of what had transpired pressed on her shoulders. Healing and fighting had merged, and she had embraced both to protect those she was sworn to defend. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the duality of her existence solidify. She was both healer and warrior, a force of life and death intertwined. And the soldiers who had once underestimated her now knew the truth. Sergeant Emma Collins was not just a medic. She was a storm that could not be contained, a guardian who would stop at nothing to protect those in her charge. The ambush had ended, but the legend of the medic who became the warrior had just begun. The acrid smoke of burning vehicles and the coppery scent of blood filled the night air. Emma Collins crouched behind the charred remains of a convoy truck, her chest rising and falling steadily despite the chaos surrounding her. Her hands, once used to apply bandages with delicate precision, now gripped a rifle with unflinching resolve. The adrenaline coursing through her veins was tempered by the calm discipline that had been drilled into her from childhood. She was no longer simply the medic. She was the embodiment of focus, instinct, and lethal intent. Her first instinct had been to heal, to tend the wounded and stabilize the injured. But as the ambush unfolded with merciless efficiency, she realized that survival, both her own and that of her team, depended on more than just medical skill. The attackers were coordinated, methodical, and merciless, and the lives of those she cared about depended on her ability to become something else entirely. Emma took a deep breath, letting the training of years settle over her like armor. Her father's lessons returned vividly in her mind. How to move silently, how to anticipate the enemy's actions, how to read their intentions from subtle shifts in posture and eye movement. Every muscle memory he had instilled surged into action. She slid along the perimeter, using the terrain as cover, her rifle aimed with surgical precision. Each movement was deliberate, calculated to maximize her advantage while minimizing exposure. Her pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled, even as bullets tore through the air around her. Emma's mother's teachings came next: precision, patience, observation. Where she had once applied bandages and sutures with exacting care, she now applied lethal force with the same clinical accuracy. Aiming for the heart, the center of mass, neutralizing threats before they could strike. Every shot was deliberate, every movement precise. The transition was seamless. The same hands that had saved lives could now protect them in ways no one anticipated. From her vantage point behind the wreckage, she observed the enemy leader directing the remaining insurgents with a brutal efficiency. He was large, confident, and clearly experienced in combat. Most medics would have retreated, hidden, or called for reinforcements. Emma calculated the risks in seconds and decided this fight required her to be proactive. Waiting for the enemy to make mistakes was a luxury they would not allow. She would dictate the battlefield. Emma moved like a shadow through the ruins, silent and unseen. She approached from angles that the insurgents had not anticipated, striking quickly and efficiently. One by one, the attackers fell to her precision, their confidence eroding with each calculated shot. The soldiers who had survived the initial ambush began to regroup, emboldened by her actions. For the first time, they realized that the medic who had seemed gentle and unassuming was in fact a force to be reckoned with. The night air crackled with tension as Emma engaged the enemy leader directly. He had not expected resistance from someone like her, and his surprise was evident. Bullets whizzed past, and the scent of gunpowder mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Emma ducked, rolled, and returned fire with lethal efficiency. She anticipated his movements, exploiting every opening, using the environment to her advantage. Every instinct she had honed, from childhood lessons with her father to battlefield experience, converged into a single, unstoppable force. As the fight intensified, Emma's focus narrowed to a single point: protect her team. She moved swiftly between wounded soldiers, ensuring they were shielded while engaging the enemy. Her actions were both defensive and offensive, a fluid combination that kept her alive while neutralizing threats. She was simultaneously the guardian and the hunter, a paradox that no one in the ambush could anticipate or counter. Minutes stretched into hours in what felt like an eternity. Smoke obscured vision, flames illuminated fleeting silhouettes, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the night. Yet through it all, Emma's calm and focus never wavered. She moved with purpose, calculating every risk, reacting instinctively to threats, and ensuring that every action served the larger goal: survival of her comrades. Her transformation was complete when she faced the insurgent leader one final time. Towering and imposing, he advanced with a predator's confidence. Emma's heart rate remained steady. Fear had been replaced by resolve. She anticipated his attack, sidestepped with precision, and returned fire, striking with exacting accuracy. He faltered, then fell, the fight finally over. The remaining insurgents, leaderless and disoriented, attempted to regroup, but were quickly neutralized by Emma and the reinvigorated soldiers. The ambush had been broken, not through luck, but through discipline, skill, and the singular will of a medic-turned-warrior. The battlefield fell silent, except for the distant crackle of fires and the shallow, exhausted breaths of survivors. Emma stood amid the chaos, her uniform scorched and bloodied, yet her posture unyielding. She surveyed the aftermath, fallen attackers, wounded comrades, and the destruction wrought by a battle that had erupted in minutes. Her eyes were sharp, scanning for any lingering threats, ensuring that the mission was truly complete. She had embraced the duality of her existence fully, healer and fighter, protector and executor. When Captain Morales finally approached, staggering slightly from his injuries, he looked at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Sergeant, you've done the impossible," he said, voice cracking. Emma merely nodded, fatigue pulling at her features, yet her resolve remained intact. There was no pride in her expression, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing her team had survived because of her actions. In the aftermath, the soldiers who had doubted her before now whispered her name with reverence. Private Lucas, eyes wide with awe, could barely speak. I didn't think anyone could do that," he admitted. Emma crouched beside him, her hand briefly resting on his shoulder. "You can," she said simply. "You just have to believe that you're capable." The night deepened, and the desert became still again, though scarred by fire and blood. Emma stood alone for a moment, surveying the battlefield from the ridge above the village. She had acted decisively, efficiently, and lethally, yet her mind remained clear. The calmness that had always defined her had not been lost. It had evolved, now tempered by experience and necessity. She had become more than a medic. She had become a guardian, a force capable of controlling the outcome of life and death situations. Every step she had taken in life, childhood training with her father, lessons from her mother, years of military discipline, had led to this moment. The transformation was not sudden. It was the culmination of every choice she had ever made, every skill she had honed, every instinct she had trusted. Emma Collins had embraced her full potential, becoming the storm in the chaos, the calm in the center of destruction, and the protector of those who could not protect themselves. By the time reinforcements arrived, the ambush had been completely neutralized. Soldiers surveyed the scene, disbelief etched into their faces. Emma walked among them, ensuring the wounded were tended to, checking that no threats remained. Her hands were steady, her mind methodical, her presence commanding a silent respect that words could not convey. That night, as the fires burned low and the first signs of dawn touched the horizon, Emma stood on the ridge overlooking the village. She was battered, bloodied, and exhausted, yet unbroken. The medic who had been underestimated by so many had become a force of nature, a guardian whose presence alone had turned the tide of the battle. And in that moment, Sergeant Emma Collins understood something fundamental about herself. She was both healer and warrior, light and shadow, life and death. She had embraced the transformation fully, and there was no going back. The fires from the destroyed convoy and scattered equipment cast an eerie orange glow across the village, illuminating jagged shadows that danced along walls and streets. Smoke curled into the night sky, mingling with the scent of gunpowder, blood, and scorched earth. Emma Collins moved carefully through the devastation, each step deliberate, her rifle at the ready, her senses sharp. Even though the ambush had been neutralized, she knew better than anyone that danger did not disappear with the fall of the enemy. The first order of business was securing the wounded. Soldiers groaned from injuries, some bleeding heavily, others shivering from shock. Emma's hands, steady as ever, worked with swift precision. She applied tourniquets, stabilized broken limbs, and calmed terrified comrades with quiet reassurances. Each action was measured and efficient. She moved like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of survival amid chaos. Her dual role as medic and protector had never been more apparent. "Emma, we're not safe yet," Captain Morales called out, his voice hoarse from exertion. He pointed toward the surrounding ridges. "They could regroup. There may be others." Emma nodded, already scanning the perimeter. Her eyes traced every ridge, every shadow, every movement in the flickering firelight. "I'll handle it," she said calmly, though inside her mind raced with calculations. Reinforcements were on their way, but until they arrived, the survival of her team depended on vigilance, discipline, and her ability to anticipate the enemy's next move. She moved to the tallest vantage point she could find, the charred remains of a supply building, giving her a clear line of sight across the village. From this position, she could see everything: collapsed vehicles, scattered bodies, smoldering tents, and her own soldiers regrouping under makeshift cover. The night was quiet now, but the silence was dangerous. She knew that a single misstep could reignite the chaos. Emma's mind ran through the possibilities. Enemy scouts might still be hidden, watching, waiting for a chance to strike. Any sense of relief was premature. She scanned for signs of movement, using shadows to her advantage, noting every subtle shift in the landscape. Her instincts told her that the ambush was not entirely over, that remnants of the attack force might attempt one final strike. Meanwhile, she oversaw the extraction of the wounded. Soldiers carried their injured comrades to safer locations, guided by Emma's calm instructions. She moved between them like a shadow, checking vital signs, offering quick medical interventions, and ensuring that morale remained steady. Her voice was soothing yet authoritative, each word carrying weight without a trace of panic. Private Lucas, still pale and shaken from the ambush, approached her cautiously. "Sergeant?" "What now?" he asked, his voice trembling. Emma crouched beside him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Now we survive," she said simply. "We hold our ground, we protect each other, and we make it to dawn. Everything else comes after." The soldiers responded to her presence with renewed focus. Emma had become the anchor in the storm, a steady hand guiding them through the chaos. Her leadership was not just tactical, but psychological. She understood that fear could be paralyzing, and she used her calm demeanor to instill courage. Every glance, every word, every gesture reassured her team that they could endure this night. Hours passed with a tense rhythm. Emma moved continuously, checking defensive positions, reinforcing barricades, and ensuring that her team remained alert. Her rifle never left her side, and her eyes scanned every ridge, every alleyway, every shadow for potential threats. The fires burned low, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to merge with the dark terrain. Every movement could conceal danger. Every sound could signal the return of the enemy. In the distance, she spotted faint movement along the hills, a group attempting to regroup, testing the perimeter. Without hesitation, Emma coordinated a precise response. She signaled to two soldiers to cover her flank, then advanced with calculated stealth. The enemy was unaware that the medic they had underestimated had become the hunter. Emma's rifle was steady, her aim precise, and one by one, the approaching soldiers were neutralized before they could mount an attack. The remainder of the night was a series of calculated maneuvers. Emma moved through the village, checking the wounded, securing positions, and ensuring that no one was left vulnerable. She used the flickering firelight to her advantage, blending shadows and light to remain unseen while maintaining full visibility of the battlefield. Each action reinforced the survival of her team and the control she had regained over the situation. Amid the tension, Emma also found moments to tend to the most critically injured. A soldier with a deep chest wound was barely conscious. She stabilized him with swift, deliberate movements, ignoring the sting of her own scrapes and burns. Another had a fractured leg. She guided him to safer ground and applied a makeshift splint with efficiency born of years of experience. Every life saved reinforced her resolve. Every act of care, a reminder of why she had embraced both roles, healer and warrior. By midnight, the village lay mostly quiet, the remaining insurgents either eliminated or fleeing into the darkness. Emma continued her patrol, moving systematically through the area to ensure no threat remained. Her mind remained sharp, analyzing every possibility, anticipating the enemy's tactics, and preparing contingencies. She was a sentinel, a guardian, the unyielding force standing between life and death. The soldiers began to rest in shifts, but Emma remained vigilant. She took no seat, no comfort. Her eyes scanned the horizon, her senses attuned to the slightest disturbance. The desert night was filled with subtle sounds, rustling leaves, distant animal cries, the occasional snap of a twig. Emma interpreted each as a potential threat, never letting her guard down. Her training, her instincts, and her fierce determination created an invisible shield around her team. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the eastern horizon, the village lay secure. The fires burned down to embers, the injured were stabilized, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. Emma allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, her chest rising and falling with controlled rhythm. She surveyed the battlefield from a ridge overlooking the village, taking in the devastation and the lives she had helped preserve. In that moment, she understood the full scope of her transformation. The medic who had been underestimated, the healer who had seemed fragile, had become a force of precision and resolve. She had navigated chaos, protected her team, neutralized threats, and ensured survival. The Night of Fire had tested every skill she possessed, physical, mental, and emotional, and she had emerged not only intact, but victorious. Captain Morales approached at first light, surveying the scene alongside Emma. "Sergeant, I don't know how you did it," he said quietly, awe lacing his voice. Emma merely shook her head. "We survived," she replied. "That's all that matters." Her eyes returned to the horizon, scanning for any lingering threat. She was not done yet. Vigilance would remain until every last soldier was safe. The Night of Fire had passed, but its lessons, scars, and triumphs would linger forever. Emma Collins had proven herself beyond doubt, a medic who could heal, a warrior who could strike, and a leader whose presence alone inspired courage. And as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the scarred village, she knew that her story, and the story of the team she had protected, was only beginning to be told. The first light of dawn stretched across the desert horizon, painting the village in soft shades of gold and pink. Smoke from the previous night's fires drifted lazily into the sky, mingling with the cool morning air. The village itself bore the scars of chaos, charred vehicles, shattered windows, and the remnants of tents torn apart by fire. Yet amid the destruction, there was movement, cautious, deliberate, and determined. Survivors emerged from the shadows, assessing the damage, tending the wounded, and searching for signs of lingering threats. Emma Collins moved among the villagers, and her team with the same calm precision she had exhibited throughout the ambush. Her hands, bloodied and bruised, still moved with skill and purpose as she checked on the injured and administered care where needed. She had become a lifeline, not only physically, but psychologically. Her presence offered reassurance, a steady anchor in a sea of fear and confusion. Soldiers gathered in small groups, quietly sharing their experiences from the night. Private Lucas approached Emma again, his expression a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I "I don't know how you did it, Sergeant," he admitted, voice trembling. "You saved us all." Emma's gaze softened, though her expression remained composed. "We survived because we worked together," she said. "Courage isn't just one person's. It's everyone supporting each other." Lucas nodded, trying to absorb the lesson, while the reality of the previous night's events settled over him. Captain Morales walked toward Emma, leaning on the charred remains of a vehicle for support. He was visibly fatigued, yet his eyes carried a deep respect. "Sergeant Collins," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "your actions last night? You turned the tide. Without you, most of us wouldn't have made it." Emma simply nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. There was no pride in her response, only the quiet acknowledgement of duty fulfilled. The village slowly came back to life. As survivors cleaned debris, rebuilt damaged structures, and assisted the wounded, children, who had hidden in fear just hours before, now cautiously explored their surroundings, peering curiously at the soldiers who had protected them. Villagers offered small tokens of gratitude to Emma and the others, bread, water, and hand-drawn pictures from the children. Emma accepted them with a nod, her eyes scanning the horizon for any lingering threats. Gratitude was welcome, but vigilance was essential. Despite the relative calm, tension remained high. Emma knew the ambush might have been the first wave, a test of the village's defenses and the soldiers' readiness. Enemy forces could regroup, or other hostile elements could be nearby. She began coordinating defensive measures with Captain Morales and the remaining soldiers, reinforcing barricades, establishing observation points, and organizing shifts to monitor the perimeter. Her dual role as healer and tactical leader had expanded. Survival now depended on strategy as much as courage. Throughout the morning, Emma's actions earned the quiet admiration of her team. Soldiers who had once underestimated her were now watching her closely, learning from her approach to both combat and care. She moved with authority, yet without arrogance, teaching through action rather than words. Even the most skeptical among them began to see the truth. Sergeant Emma Collins was not just a medic. She was a force capable of shaping the outcome of life and death situations. As she moved through the village, tending to the wounded and coordinating defenses, Emma allowed herself a brief moment to reflect on the night's events. She thought of the soldiers she had protected, the villagers she had reassured, and the enemies she had neutralized. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon her, yet she bore it with quiet strength. She understood the cost of survival, not only in lives, but in the emotional and psychological toll it exacted. Private Lucas, now assisting with perimeter checks, approached again, a tentative smile on his face. "Sergeant, will we ever talk about last night?" he asked quietly. Emma looked at him, her expression calm, yet thoughtful. "We will," she said, "but not now. Right now, we focus on survival, on rebuilding, and on honoring those who fought alongside us. The rest can wait." Her words carried weight, instilling a sense of purpose in the young soldier. By mid-morning, the village had stabilized. Reinforcements were on the horizon, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. Emma continued to oversee the care of the wounded, ensuring that every soldier and villager received attention. Her movements were methodical, her focus unwavering, and her presence reassuring. She had become the linchpin of recovery, the calm in the aftermath of chaos. Captain Morales approached once more, holding a small notepad. "Sergeant Collins, I've already begun documenting the events of last night. Your actions will be reported and recognized. You've set a new standard for bravery, skill, and leadership." Emma nodded, though her eyes remained on the horizon. Recognition was not her goal. Survival was. But the acknowledgement of her team's reliance on her and the lives she had saved was a quiet affirmation of the path she had chosen. The villagers, now cautiously resuming their routines, approached Emma with gratitude and curiosity. She moved among them, listening to their stories of the night, tending minor injuries and offering reassurance. Their fear had been replaced by cautious hope, their trust in the soldiers reinforced by Emma's decisive actions. She had become more than a medic. She was a symbol of resilience, courage, and protection. As the sun climbed higher, Emma took a rare moment to herself, sitting on the ridge overlooking the village. She allowed her mind to process the events of the night, the ambush, the chaos, the fear, and the ultimate survival of her team. Her hands were calloused and scraped, her uniform torn and bloodied, yet she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had embraced her duality fully, healer and warrior, protector and force of action. Her thoughts turned to the soldiers who had relied on her, the villagers she had defended, and the enemies she had confronted. She understood the delicate balance of life and death, courage and fear, strategy and instinct. Each moment of the night had tested her in ways that no training alone could have prepared her for. Yet she had emerged intact, and her team had survived. That, she realized, was all that mattered. Captain Morales joined her on the ridge, surveying the village in silence. "You've done more than anyone could have expected," he said quietly. "The team, they're inspired by you. They'll follow you anywhere." Emma looked at him, her expression calm but resolute. "They don't need to follow me," she said. "They just need to trust themselves and each other. That's how we survive." As the day progressed, the village began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Fires were extinguished, debris cleared, and defensive positions reinforced. Soldiers and villagers alike moved with cautious purpose, their confidence slowly rebuilding under Emma's guidance. The events of the night would leave scars, physical and emotional, but her presence provided a steadying force, a reminder that survival and resilience were possible even in the darkest moments. By late afternoon, the aftermath had been largely addressed. Emma moved among her team, checking on their physical and emotional state, offering guidance and quiet reassurance. Her dual role as healer and warrior had expanded into one of mentorship, leadership, and unwavering support. She had proven herself in the crucible of chaos, and the respect and trust she had earned was evident in every glance and gesture from her team. The day ended with a quiet, reflective moment. Emma stood at the edge of the village, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly before her, a reminder of both the beauty and danger that existed in the world she had chosen to navigate. She allowed herself a brief sigh, the weight of responsibility still heavy but manageable. She had survived, and she had ensured the survival of others. That, above all, mattered. And in that quiet moment, Sergeant Emma Collins understood the truth of her existence. She was both healer and warrior, protector and executor, light and shadow. The ambush had tested her in every way imaginable, yet she had emerged not only intact, but transformed, stronger, and more resolute than ever before. The desert lay quiet in the early morning light, the horizon painted with soft shades of orange and gold. The village, once scarred by fire and chaos, now held a fragile sense of order. The destruction from the ambush had left deep marks on the streets, the buildings, and the lives of those who had survived. Yet amid the ruin, there was life, movement, and hope. And standing at the center of this renewed vitality was Sergeant Emma Collins, the medic who had become legend. Emma moved among the villagers and soldiers, her presence calm, steady, and commanding. Her hands, once solely instruments of healing, now carried the weight of both protection and restoration. She helped rebuild barricades, coordinated defensive positions, and continued her care of the injured. Though her uniform was still bloodied and her body fatigued, there was a quiet strength in her movements, a resolute determination that inspired all who witnessed her. Captain Morales gathered the team for a debrief, his expression a mixture of pride and solemnity. "What happened here," he began, gesturing toward the remnants of the ambush, "is a testament to skill, courage, and leadership. Sergeant Collins' actions saved countless lives. Her presence turned what could have been a massacre into survival. We owe her more than words can express." The soldiers exchanged glances, their admiration for Emma clear in every expression. Private Lucas stepped forward, his eyes reflecting both awe and gratitude. I didn't believe it at first," he admitted, voice trembling slightly. "I thought we were doomed. But Sergeant, you changed everything. You saved us." Emma nodded, her gaze steady. "We saved each other," she said. "Courage isn't just about one person. It's about trust, preparation, and knowing what must be done when the moment comes." The villagers approached as well, carrying small offerings of gratitude, baskets of bread, jars of water, and handmade tokens. Children shyly presented drawings of the soldiers, depicting Emma with a rifle in one hand and a medical bag in the other. Their innocence and appreciation struck Emma deeply. She knelt to accept the gifts, her hands steady despite the emotional weight. Every smile, every gesture, every word of thanks reinforced the purpose she had embraced fully, to protect life in all its forms. Word of the ambush and Emma's decisive actions began to spread beyond the village. Reinforcements and higher command arrived, assessing the situation and documenting the events. Reports described the ambush, the chaos, and the heroism displayed. Yet it was Emma's combination of skill, calm under pressure, and decisive action that stood out. She had not only neutralized the threat, but also ensured the survival of every soldier and civilian under her care. Captain Morales approached Emma privately, a solemn look in his eyes. "Sergeant, your actions will be recognized at the highest levels. The bravery, precision, and leadership you displayed. It's extraordinary. You've set a new standard." Emma met his gaze, expression calm but resolute. "Recognition isn't why I did it," she said. "I did it because people's lives depended on it. That's all that matters." Yet even as she spoke, she allowed herself a small sense of pride, the quiet acknowledgement that she had truly made a difference. The survivors slowly began to rebuild, repairing homes, clearing debris, and restoring a sense of normalcy. Emma moved among them, guiding efforts, offering advice, and ensuring the wounded received proper care. Her dual role as healer and warrior had extended into leadership and mentorship. Soldiers who had once doubted her abilities now looked to her for guidance, inspired by her calm decisiveness and unshakable presence. As days passed, the impact of her actions became clearer. The village remained safe, the wounded recovered under her care, and the soldiers were better prepared for any future threats. Emma's influence was evident in the morale, confidence, and resilience of everyone around her. Her presence had become a stabilizing force, a symbol of courage and competence in the face of chaos. Emma, herself, took a quiet moment to reflect. She stood on a ridge overlooking the village, the desert stretching endlessly beyond. The events of the ambush and the night of fire replayed in her mind, the fear, the adrenaline, the decisions, and the actions that had ensured survival. She realized that her identity had evolved. She was no longer simply a medic, no longer simply a soldier. She had become a guardian, a force capable of shaping the outcome of life and death situations. Her thoughts drifted to the lessons she had learned along the way, the discipline taught by her father, the precision and care instilled by her mother, the countless hours of training and observation that had honed her instincts. All of it had converged in that single moment of crisis, allowing her to rise above fear and uncertainty. She understood that heroism was not born of desire, but of necessity, the willingness to act decisively when lives hung in the balance. Later that day, the village held a small ceremony to honor the survivors and recognize the courage of the soldiers. Emma remained understated, standing to the side, observing as Captain Morales spoke of bravery, resilience, and the extraordinary actions that had ensured survival. She did not seek attention, yet the respect in the eyes of those gathered was unmistakable. Children waved, soldiers nodded, and villagers whispered thanks. Every acknowledgement reinforced the impact of her actions, not for glory, but for the lives she had touched. As the ceremony concluded, Emma returned to her duties, checking on supplies, reinforcing defenses, and tending to the last of the wounded. Her dual identity remained intact: healer and warrior, protector and executor, calm in chaos and decisive in action. She moved among her team, offering guidance, reassurance, and mentorship. Her presence alone instilled confidence, her example a lesson in courage, resilience, and responsibility. By evening, the village had regained a fragile peace. Fires were extinguished, the wounded stabilized, and defensive positions maintained. Emma took a final walk through the streets, observing the villagers as they resumed their daily routines. Children played cautiously, villagers repaired their homes, and soldiers maintained vigilance. The scars of the ambush remained, but so did the lessons learned, the bonds forged, and the resilience inspired by Emma's actions. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Emma paused on a ridge overlooking the village. The events of the ambush and the night of fire had left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Soldiers, villagers, and even Emma herself had been transformed. She understood that her actions would be remembered, not just for the lives saved, but for the courage, leadership, and unwavering commitment that had defined every moment of the crisis. Private Lucas approached her one last time, carrying a small drawing made by one of the children. It depicted Emma with a rifle in one hand, a medical bag in the other, standing amidst flames with calm determination. He handed it to her silently, his eyes reflecting admiration and gratitude. Emma accepted it, nodding quietly. She had never sought recognition, yet this simple gesture encapsulated the legacy she had created, a symbol of courage, skill, and hope. Emma Collins, the medic who had been underestimated, had become more than a soldier, more than a healer. She had become a legend, a guardian whose presence ensured survival, and a beacon of resilience for those who had faced the darkness of chaos and emerged alive. Her story would be told and retold, a testament to the extraordinary capabilities of someone who refused to be defined by expectations, someone who rose to the occasion when lives depended on it. And as night settled over the desert, Emma stood on the ridge, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The ambush was over, the village safe, and the survivors thriving. Yet she remained vigilant, aware that danger could return at any moment. But she was ready. She had become both shield and sword, healer and warrior, light and shadow. She had embraced her full potential, and her legacy, forged in fire, blood, and courage, would endure long after the desert returned to silence. Sergeant Emma Collins, once underestimated, had proven that true strength lay not only in firepower or training, but in the courage to act decisively, the skill to execute flawlessly, and the heart to protect those who could not protect themselves. And in that realization, she found her purpose, her power, and her place in the annals of heroism.